Why do some people grow older surrounded by love, connection, and respect, while others face an invisible wall of loneliness? What if the answer isn't about how kind or generous you've been, but something far more unexpected? There's a silent shift that happens after the age of 70, a moment when friends stop calling, when visits become rare, when invitations quietly disappear. And it's not because people are cruel or forgetful. It's because of one hidden behavior. So common, so subtle. Most people don't even realize they're doing it. But this behavior sends a powerful message. It makes others feel drained, unimportant, or even unwelcome, pushing them away, little by little, until one day, you're left wondering why no one stays. If you've ever felt that sting of being overlooked or left out, you're not alone. And it's not your fault. But there is something you can do about it, starting today. In this video, we're going to reveal the truth behind why so many people feel abandoned after 70, even when they've spent a lifetime building relationships. We'll look at the subtle habits that quietly drive people away, and the powerful changes that can pull them back. These are not theories. These are real patterns observed in long-term studies on aging, social connection, and mental well-being. And once you see them, you won't be able to unsee them. Stick with us until the end, because the final insight may completely change the way you see yourself and how others see you. Comment number 1 if you're ready. Let's start with something many people overlook: the way your voice makes others feel. Not what you say, but how you say it. Over time, emotional tone becomes one of the most powerful forces in our relationships. And yet, most people after 70 don't realize how much it changes, or how deeply it affects the people around them. George never raised his voice, he never insulted anyone, but over the years, something shifted. His tone, once curious and warm, grew sharp, flat, impatient. Not cruel, just heavy. Every conversation began to feel like a correction, a complaint, or a reminder of how things used to be better. When his daughter mentioned a new job opportunity, his response was short. Hope it lasts longer than the last one. When his neighbor shared news about a grandchild, he nodded, uninterested, and replied, "Kids these days." No harsh words. But the tone said everything. And slowly, without confrontation, people stopped calling, stopped sharing. The warmth left the room before he did. Evelyn, on the other hand, has a softness in her voice that doesn't come from pretending everything is perfect. It comes from being present. She reacts with interest. She pauses to understand. Even when she disagrees, her words land gently. One time, her grandson told her about a new tattoo. George might have scoffed. Evelyn leaned in, smiled, and asked, "What does it mean to you?" That's the difference. Research from the University of California has shown that emotional tone carries more weight in relationships than the actual content of words, especially as people age. When communication loses warmth, even the kindest messages can feel cold or critical. And here's the problem. After 70, many people stop noticing how their tone has changed. They confuse directness with honesty. They think silence is just tiredness, but others feel it as distance or even rejection. So how do you fix it? Start paying attention to what people feel when they talk to you. Do they open up or shut down? Do they call you just to talk or only when they need something? Even a slight shift, speaking with more patience, more curiosity, more encouragement, can bring people closer. And remember, it's not about faking positivity. It's about choosing to speak in a way that makes others feel safe, seen, and valued. Now, moving to the second factor that silently affects longevity and connection, the way we talk about ourselves. Storytelling is powerful. It helps us connect, reflect, and feel understood. But when storytelling becomes too centered on our own experience, our own pain, our own past, it can slowly begin to push others away. George loves to talk about his career, his surgeries, the way things used to be. He can spend an hour telling you about an old machine he once built, without noticing that your eyes glazed over 20 minutes ago. When his grandson tried to share something about college life, George nodded and launched into a story from 1963 about how school was tougher back then. The moment passed. The connection faded. It's not that his stories lack value. It's that they leave no room for others to be part of the conversation. Evelyn, too, has a lifetime of stories, but she chooses them carefully. She'll share, one only when it brings someone else into the spotlight. If a young neighbor is struggling with a job, she might say, "I remember feeling lost too, and here's what helped me." Then she turns the focus back. What's the hardest part for you right now? That shift from me to you is everything. A study published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that conversations dominated by one person's experiences significantly reduce emotional closeness, especially in intergenerational relationships. Younger people, in particular, begin to withdraw, not out of disrespect, but out of exhaustion. The truth is, after a certain age, many people start clinging to their stories, not to boast, but to be seen, to be remembered, to matter. But ironically, the more someone talks only about themselves, the more invisible they become. Evelyn's secret is that she uses her stories as bridges, not walls. She makes others feel heard, not overshadowed. So here's the practical shift. The next time you share a memory, pause and ask a question. Bring someone else into the moment. Make it a dialogue, not a monologue. Because connection isn't built by the stories we tell. It's built by how much space we leave for others to tell theirs. Another habit that often gets ignored is the slow erosion of small, meaningful gestures. As people age, it's easy to underestimate the impact of simple acts. A quick message, a thank you note, remembering someone's birthday, asking how a friend's doctor visit went. These moments seem minor, but in reality, they are the glue that holds relationships together. George used to be thoughtful. He never missed a holiday when he was younger. But now, he shrugs it off. People are too busy these days, he says. They don't care if I call. So he doesn't. He waits. And when no one calls him either, he feels forgotten. It becomes a quiet cycle. He stops reaching out. And in return, the world stops reaching back. Evelyn lives differently. Her calendar is full, not of grand events, but of little reminders. Send a message to Sarah, call Tom after his surgery, drop off soup for her neighbor. She doesn't do it to be praised. She does it because she knows what it feels like to be remembered. One Saturday morning, she left a handwritten card on a friend's doorstep. Just a few kind words and a memory they once shared. That same afternoon, the friend called her in tears. "No one does that anymore," she said. It meant everything. Science backs this up. A 2022 study from Harvard found that micro-interactions, tiny acts of social engagement, have a disproportionately large impact on emotional well-being, especially in older adults. It's not about hosting parties or planning big reunions. It's about being present in small ways that say, "You matter. I see you." George waits for others to remember him. Evelyn creates reasons for people to remember her. That's the difference. And the good news? You can change this pattern today. Send a message, make a call, show up with something simple, like your attention. These moments won't just strengthen your connections. They'll remind people why they feel good around you. Here's the fourth behavior that slowly undermines your health and relationships. The habit of chronic pessimism, often disguised as just being realistic. It starts innocently, a comment here, a shrug there. But over time, it becomes a lens through which everything is viewed, and that lens quietly darkens the room for everyone else. George would describe himself as practical, not negative, just honest. If someone mentions a new idea, he's quick to point out why it won't work. If a family member shares good news, his instinct is to warn them not to get their hopes up. When his daughter called to say she was thinking about moving closer, his first words were, "You won't like it here. Too quiet, too cold, probably not a good idea." The conversation ended early. She never brought it up again. Evelyn sees things too. She's not naive. She reads the news, sees the pain in the world, knows her own limitations. But she's made a choice, a quiet, deliberate choice, to focus on what can grow instead of what is failing. When her neighbor lost a spouse, Evelyn didn't offer false cheer. She showed up. She sat beside her. And when the time was right, she gently said, "Grief never leaves, but neither does love. Let's find ways to keep him with us." There's a deep strength in that kind of optimism. It doesn't deny pain, it respects it. But it also believes that hope is worth protecting. A 2020 Yale study on aging found that older adults with a more optimistic outlook lived on average 7.5 years longer than those who leaned toward negativity, even when controlling for health, income, and education. That's not just emotion. That's biology. Negativity wears down the immune system. It raises stress hormones. It isolates you from others, because no one wants to feel drained after every conversation. George doesn't see this. To him, he's just speaking the truth. But the truth without kindness, without light, can feel like a door closing in your face. Evelyn opens windows instead. So here's a question to ask yourself. Do people leave your presence feeling lighter or heavier? The way you speak about the world becomes the world others feel around you, and the tone you choose, whether it lifts or sinks, will shape how long people stay close. Up next, the fifth pattern that deserves attention is one that hides in plain sight: emotional unavailability. At first glance, George doesn't seem closed off. He talks, he shares opinions, he even tells jokes. But there's a limit. Ask him how he's really feeling, and he deflects. Mention something vulnerable, and he changes the subject. There's a wall, not made of anger or pride, but of distance. A quiet discomfort with going deeper. His son once tried to open up about a painful divorce. George nodded, then replied, "Well, that's life. You'll get over it." And just like that, the door closed. No cruelty, just absence. Evelyn, on the other hand, creates space for emotion, not by fixing problems, but by holding them. She doesn't rush to give advice. She listens with presence. And when someone shares something raw, she meets it with softness, not solutions. Her friend once admitted to feeling worthless after retiring. Evelyn didn't offer clichés. She placed a hand gently on her friend's shoulder and said, "I felt that too. You're not alone." That moment, simple as it was, forged a deeper bond than years of small talk. Emotional unavailability often increases with age. Not because people don't care, but because they've learned to protect themselves. After a lifetime of hardship, disappointment, or loss, many older adults retreat into silence. They keep conversations safe, surface level. But here's the cost. People don't connect with your experiences. They connect with your emotions. If those stay hidden, so do the real connections. Research published in the Gerontologist Journal found that older adults who regularly engaged in emotionally open conversations had significantly lower levels of loneliness and depression, even if they had fewer social contacts overall. It's not about how many people you talk to. It's about how deeply you're willing to be seen. George speaks, but he stays unseen. Evelyn allows others to see her, and invites them to be seen too. To begin changing this, try one small act. Share how something made you feel, not just what happened. And when someone opens up, don't rush to fix it. Stay with them. That's where connection grows. As we move forward, there's a sixth pattern that quietly pushes people away: the fear of change and the habit of judging younger generations. It's subtle. It doesn't always come with harsh words. Sometimes it's just a sigh when someone mentions social media, a dismissive comment about kids today, a refusal to learn something new because that's not how we did things. George never intended to criticize, but his voice often carried a quiet disapproval. When his granddaughter showed him a photo from her phone, he muttered, "You spend too much time on that thing." When a friend mentioned ordering groceries online, he laughed, "Can't anyone do anything the real way anymore?" He didn't mean harm, but over time, those remarks added up. People stopped sharing, stopped including him in new experiences. He became the last to know, the last to be invited, because being around him felt like being corrected. Evelyn sees things differently. She's not trying to become 20 again, but she's curious. When her grandson showed her how to use video chat, she smiled and said, "Show me again, I want to learn." When her neighbor started a podcast, she listened, not because she loved the topic, but because she cared about the person. That curiosity, genuine and open, builds bridges across generations. A 2019 study in the Journal of Communication found that older adults who engage with new technology and culture, even in small ways, report higher levels of intergenerational closeness and overall life satisfaction. Adaptability isn't just about staying modern. It's about staying connected. Every time you resist change, you risk losing access to people's lives. Every time you embrace it, you show others that their world matters to you. George often talks about how lonely he feels, but what he doesn't see is that his unwillingness to meet others where they are is what keeps them away. Evelyn, by contrast, is invited everywhere, not because she's trendy, but because she's open. So here's a quiet challenge. The next time you feel the urge to criticize something new, pause and ask a question instead. Curiosity is connection, and connection is what keeps your world wide, even when your steps grow slower. Finally, there's one last habit that might surprise you. Letting health struggles become your entire story. Illness is real. Pain is real. And after 70, almost everyone is carrying some invisible burden, a diagnosis, a daily discomfort, a body that no longer moves the way it once did. But there's a quiet line many people cross without realizing it. They stop being seen as themselves and start being seen only through the lens of their illness. George didn't notice when this shift happened. At first, he just wanted people to understand what he was going through. But over time, every conversation began to circle back to his back pain, his medications, his doctor visits. Even moments of joy became footnotes to discomfort. When a neighbor invited him to a picnic, his response wasn't, "Thanks, I'd love to." It was, "Depends on my knees." When his grandson visited, George spent the first half hour listing symptoms and side effects. The result? People began to pull away. Not out of cruelty, but out of helplessness. They didn't know how to connect anymore. Evelyn also lives with pain.
She's had arthritis for years. She goes to therapy. She has bad days. But she made a decision. Her illness is a chapter, not the whole book. When friends ask how she's doing, she's honest, but brief. Then she turns the conversation outward.
"I'm managing. How's your daughter's new job going?" She doesn't pretend to be fine. She just refuses to let her condition become her only identity. A 2021 study published in Psychology and Aging found that older adults who focused excessively on their health symptoms experienced greater social isolation, even when surrounded by people who cared. The reason? Their relationships became transactional, defined by updates and concerns, not by mutual exchange or shared experiences. George feels forgotten. But what he doesn't see is that by constantly leading with his pain, he slowly trained others to expect nothing else. Evelyn feels supported because she leaves space for connection, not just concern. So here's something to reflect on. Are you letting your health inform your life or define it? There's room to talk about pain, but don't let it be the only language you speak. You are still a whole person, and the people around you want to connect with that person, not just the symptoms. So, now you've seen what really drives people away after the age of 70 and what draws them in closer than ever. It's not about popularity, It's not about being entertaining or even healthy. It's about presence, tone, openness, the willingness to grow, even in the later chapters of life. George and Evelyn walked the same path of aging, but in very different ways. George held on to old habits. Tone hardened, stories became one-sided, gestures faded, and his world grew smaller. Not because people stopped caring, but because connection needs room to breathe. And George never opened the window. Evelyn, in contrast, kept her heart open. Her words carried warmth. Her stories included others. She made small gestures that echoed. She didn't hide her pain, but she didn't lead with it either. And because of that, people kept coming back. These aren't personality traits, they're choices. Quiet, daily choices. And those choices shape everything. They shape how often your phone rings. They shape whether your home feels like a place of life or just silence. They shape how your grandchildren remember you. And most of all, they shape how you feel about yourself. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to fix everything overnight. But you do have to notice. Notice the tone of your voice. Notice how often you ask questions. Notice whether you make space or take space. And then, gently, begin to shift. Because it's never too late to rebuild connection. Never too late to become the kind of person people feel safe around, seen by, loved by. The world doesn't abandon you after 70. It simply listens more closely to the signals you send. So if you're ready to send new signals, if you're ready to create the kind of presence people crave, if you're ready to become more like Evelyn and less like the lonely version of George, then comment below, like this video, subscribe for more wisdom like this, and turn on the bell so you never miss a moment of truth.